This is Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. An informal chats with top business moguls as they share their stories of failure and success in a fun and relaxed way. Get entertained, educated, and unlock the secrets to success.
Welcome to Business Decoded with Ronnie Spellman. I am excited to have someone really special with a lot of international experience, my good friend Kevin Howard. Kevin, welcome to Business Decoded.
Ronnie, it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
Good to hear from you and see you. I know we've been friends for a few years, and we met at a university where we were both there, part of an advisory board group, and it was exciting to see you there because it was a very entrepreneurial-focused organization, or that event at least. But you were the senior scientist at Dow Chemical, which is a large global company. Tell me about Dow, first of all. I know I forget the numbers now, $40-something billion in annual revenue. But tell me about your experience at Dow, and then once you tell us about Dow and what you did near the end of your career before retiring, I'd love to know where you grew up and how you evolved and reached Dow. But tell us about your role at Dow. I was intrigued by your work.
Okay. Well, I'd be happy to. So I started at Dow way back in 1989 after I did my PhD at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and did a postdoc at the...
Which university?
University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign.
That's a great university.
It certainly is.
Amazing. The strong engineering program, if I remember correctly, as well.
Strong engineering, strong chemistry, strong physics.
That's fantastic.
Yes, and material science. I shouldn't forget those. My colleagues there. And so upon my completion there, I hired in at Dow Chemical in the corporate R&D organization, and actually spent my entire career in corporate R&D. But unlike so many of my colleagues, I was very much interested in new business development and new technology development. And this was, of course, the early 90s and the advent of so many technological advances in electronics and computers and material science and chemistry that I wanted to do more than just work in the laboratory.
Right.
And one of my first experiences that I really championed was I spent probably close to 9 years developing a product and actually taking it to commercialization and even doing the technical marketing and technical development across Asia and Europe, as well as the United States. So that was a material used for electronic applications for packaging. And we brought that up as a grassroots new project in Dow. And
so it's basically incubated in Dow.
It was incubated in Dow. I did the very first experiment, and I also was the one who ended up shutting it down when we decided to go in a different direction in the company.
Interesting.
With that. So that was early in my career, and so the reason I bring that up is it was both a very extensive amount of time, but I was very early on had that opportunity to bring a new product and a new material to commercialization. And as a young employee, that was an opportunity that I was afforded that many scientists never get the opportunity to do.
Right.
I proceeded from there to go on to a whole host of other areas, including working with, for example, Dow and IBM.
Okay.
We did joint development work there at the time that IBM was bringing some brand new technology to the electronics industry, and I was the original program manager for that, along with one of our very senior scientists at the time who actually championed that whole program.
No. What's interesting, so don't lose your thought there, but I was just looking at a note of mine, and I've read about it in research. It's amazing at what technologies come out of companies like Dow. When I think back to the microwave, most people don't realize this, but it started it wasn't even a project. It came out of some other research at Raytheon.
That's right.
And then they created what became the microwave oven because he found a reaction to, I think, some chocolate or something nearby, how it was exposed, and then they created a product that eventually became the microwave that we know today that everyone nearly has. But it's amazing when you discuss incubating a new concept or product and how it gets marketed and then rolled out within the world.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And I think one of the things there was a lesson early on for me, and that is, even though Dow was a very large company, is a very large company, and I was a young man early in my career, I had some very great senior leaders who championed me, and we went and talked to all the senior leadership in the company and kept moving it forward. Wow. And so that taught me a lot of lessons about, I won't say, it's not really networking, it's more know what you know, work with people, work within the system, and opportunities can come to fruition from that.
Wow. So what kind of products, whatever you can talk about, but what kind of products did you build? Like this one you closed down, you said.
Yeah, this one was a product for packaging of electronics.
Okay.
And so it was a material that helped to manage the heat in and out of chip packages.
Interesting.
So it wasn't that the product wasn't a good product or it didn't work. Dow chose to go in a different direction, which is another lesson you learn in large companies, is sometimes companies change directions, and it's often a much more macro business decision that leads to a whole host of products being moved out. And so it was that sort of title change that resulted in us shutting it down and shutting down the facility and replacing, putting everybody into new positions. And
how big of a project was it at its height? So were you spending, I know we've done at one of my companies, we were home building, and we built this R&D facility, which at the time was unique for home building. So we purchased this huge property for about $1 billion. And we decided to build live-scale homes, full-scale homes. We built them. We put in the wiring and insulation because we wanted to understand how much time it took, how much material. And it was a great project right before the housing crisis. I think we were spending about $1.25 million on the project. But it was incredible because no one had done it before, not a full scale. They've done a model scale just to figure out the product. But it was really neat to be in an R&D side of that operation. Then early in my career, I worked at NASA, where we had a lot of similar R&D products inside of that government entity. But what was it like? How big of a scope was it?
Yeah, we actually we actually revitalized a plant at a facility in another Dow plant and brought jobs and opportunities to a Dow plant in Ludington, Michigan, that at the time was seeing a decline. And so we were able to bring, opportunity. I don't recall the number of employees we had, but we were running 2 shifts at the time.
Oh, wow.
We weren't running 3 shifts yet. We had multiple customers buying the product, and both in at that time it was primarily Japan, some in Korea, and also in Germany for some electronics or electrical applications. And so it allowed us to have a very global impact, and it allowed me to have the opportunity to understand when you take a product from an invention in a laboratory and you're actually seeing it being put into electronic devices that people use, that really tells you, it gives you a different perspective.
It does. I didn't realize until a couple years ago how much of an investment Exxon had into the plastics industry. So they produce a lot of products that's used across a wide spectrum of organizations, from, I think, plastic bottles and some others, till the pellets that create a lot of the plastic products. And I found that amazing because we only think of Exxon as just a oil and gas type company. But Dow is very similar as well in how wide of a spectrum you build products and engineer products across a multitude of industries.
Yes. Well, the biggest distinction between Dow and Exxon is that Exxon has their oil and gas, which is their big one. But they also have Exxon Chemical, which is a very large chemical company as well, as does Shell, for example. Dow does not get into oil and gas at all, but Dow is a very, very large manufacturer of plastics.
Interesting.
The basic plastics that's used every day, polyethylene and other products like that. Back at the time I was at Dow, we also did a lot of work. We had a lot of business in building and construction, water purification.
Oh, did you?
Oh, yeah. Dow invented ion exchange resins.
Oh, interesting.
To clean up, water and things from way back. So the other thing you find out in a company like Dow is the legacy of the great technology that was developed long before you come. And one of the things I learned very early on was I took every opportunity I could to speak with what I'd call the old timers. And then, of course, I became the old timer at the end. But this was at a time when, if you go back, so if this was early 90s, these were gentlemen and ladies who worked in the 60s and 70s. And hearing how it was done then and how, things advanced during their lifetime is a perspective that I think often gets lost. But we fortunately at Dow had several, I would almost call them unofficial historians who wrote several books on the history and the legacy of Dow's chemistry and chemical engineering and analytical sciences.
And that's a good point. I think that's the whole premise for me in having this program is how do we learn not just from the old timers, but people that have gone before us, whether they're old or young. Right. There's so much to gain in that knowledge of someone either having started a business and not have it work immediately or having it become successful, that these conversations are just so important because it helps those people coming behind us figure out how to overcome barriers or how to work through obstacles to build success. And so the information is just invaluable. What was neat, though, is you recognized that early in your career that it was important to talk to those old timers. I did the same thing at NASA and at Canon. I love speaking to them because their knowledge was so important. And there were a lot of young people around my age that had no interest in talking to them, and they missed out on learning a lot that could help them do their job better. But so you started out at Dow. You stayed at Dow throughout your entire career, sounds like?
Yes, that's correct. All for 30 years until 2019.
Okay. So back me up. Before you finished your PhD in Illinois, where did you complete your undergrad and your master's program?
Sure. I grew up born in Charleston, West Virginia, which is a old chemical valley, as they used to call it.
Chemical and coal.
Right. Coal on the Kanawha River and Union Carbide and DuPont and other chemical companies. My father worked for the state of West Virginia in the highway department. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. I went to West Virginia University, did my undergrad, and ended up doing my master's there.
Okay. So we had a big rivalry with you. I was at Virginia Tech.
Yes, you were,
so
and
back
I
in
still
the Big
remember
East.
that. That's right. And that was back in the days when we were sort of independents, and we played, Virginia Tech, West Virginia.
It was
still
a good
game, but it was a different level back then. That's right. And then after I had the opportunity to do my bachelor's and master's at West Virginia, then I had the opportunity to meet. We hosted a speaker from the University of Illinois named Professor Ted Brown, who was a wonderful, wonderful man. And he really encouraged me to come to the University of Illinois to do my doctorate.
Wow. And
so I went out and visited and ended up working for a gentleman named Tom Rockfuss, professor of inorganic chemistry. And Tom and I, to this day, stay in touch.
Nice.
He taught me to be a scientist.
Okay.
And I will always say that.
Right.
He taught me more of how to be tough and realize that things don't always work out, but also how to think and dissect problems and answers. And I really will always be indebted to him for his impact on me. And that I couldn't have made a better choice than to be at the University of Illinois.
That's amazing. I speak with my daughter who's studying biomedical engineering, and I encouraged her to consider a science degree because I think having what you just mentioned, that ability in science, engineering, any of those fields, to try to dissect issues and figure them out is so important. Now, I don't think she'll go into science career long term because I've been telling her that it'd be great to get into business management and maybe law and business management and build a career in building organizations and building companies. But that ability to think and find solutions is just so critical, and getting the right course in life for how to execute something, whatever that something might be. So I've encouraged her to take that general course as well, because for me it was the same. I still think like an engineer today. And my question is two things: continuous improvement, and how do I resolve issues? Now, regarding whether it's a human resource issue or whether it's a clinical science issue, how do you figure out the solution? And I'm amazed when I find people that don't think in those outcomes related focus areas. And so it sounds like that was helpful for you. Is how do you think critically about something to find the solutions that you need?
That's exactly right. How do you think critically? How do you dissect the problem, weigh the different solutions, and then part of it's also learn to be not to be afraid.
Right.
You're going to have to
True.
make decisions. And as I tell people, which I know we'll talk about more later, making decisions, you never have as much information as you'd like. And scientists would like to have all the information.
Right.
And there's never all the information. And so when you transition into more of what I would say is a leadership role, you realize that ultimately somebody has to make decisions.
Right. Very true.
And the more you have learned from your experiences and learned how to understand and dissect those problems, the more confidence you have in making those decisions. Obviously, not all decisions pan out the way you hope they would, but I think that you are exactly right, Ronnie, that ability to dissect and analyze, it's really the scientific method in many ways, really helps to solve a lot of problems.
What I learned in engineering in my early days, and I still do it today, is I have basically two buckets. One is the known, right? And this is what you learn in science and engineering, the known and then the unknown. I try to get as many items as I can in that known bucket. And then you have to figure out, do I know enough in that known bucket to make a decision, right? We'll work out the unknowns later on. We'll figure that out. But do I have enough to feel confident that we can make a really good decision with what we know today? And then you make that decision to move on. And then you adjust as you figure out more unknowns and kind of where they fit in the whole strategy. But that's really it for me, is how do I get more? A lot of people, I think, that are more spontaneous than I am, they have a bucket full of unknowns and then they make a decision, which leads to, in my opinion, a disaster. But I'm taking that kind of scientific method. What do I know and what do I don't know? And then is it enough to make a good decision today?
Right. Exactly right. And sometimes external factors force you to make decisions sooner than you would like, but that's okay.
Right.
You learn that over experience too.
That's true. So outside of that project that you just mentioned, were there any other significant projects that were exciting for you at Dow that you worked on? And then we'll get to the patents later. I'd love to hear your story on patents, but anything that was just exciting?
Yeah, I think there were several along the way. I mentioned the interactions we had with IBM for a number of years. That was at a real pivotal time in the electronics industry. And I had the opportunity to work with some just brilliant people from IBM. That was a wonderful experience. The colleagues I worked with at Dow over all the years, I had the opportunity to work in so many areas and work with world experts in topics that you would think, we can't have an expert in that particular thing.
Interesting.
And we did. We did.
Wow.
And they're not just Dow's expert, they're world-renowned experts in a lot of these things. And so I learned so many things I was always eager to learn about their expertise. Of course, I was never going to have their level of knowledge.
What's an example of some of those unique expertise?
Sure. I can think of two that are quite different. One is engineering, scale up, and process handling. We had several experts their expertise was moving materials, especially solids.
Okay.
And I thought, well, that seems rather easy to do.
Right.
It's not. And to learn how to do it in the volumes that a company like Dow moves material,
Right.
and the science behind solids moving, for example, was incredibly detailed.
Interesting.
And I learned so much from some of the folks that I got to work with in some of that expertise. And then the other example would be
now, raw materials, moving them?
Some was raw materials. My product at the end of the day was a solid, the one I talked about that I developed and we commercialized that first product. That was a solid, so ultimately we had to move that into packaging and ship it
Very cool.
overseas. The other example would be some of the brilliant people we had in analytical sciences. We had world experts in everything from transmission, electron microscopy, to X-ray diffraction, to Dow has an analytical sciences second to none, and the experts and the people I worked with were all brilliant. And they used to laugh because as I got older in my career and I got to know just how good they were, I would sometimes show up with like a bottle with something in it, and I'd go, I need to know what this is. And they would all laugh because it's like, well, Kevin's just brought us something. And, there's not much detail, but we'll figure out what it is.
Reverse engineer that product.
Well, it wasn't even reverse engineering. Okay. Sometimes it was literally, we don't know what this made, for example, or something. Or it could be, something decomposed or something. I mean, there could be a whole bunch of reasons behind it. And the way that they could dissect the problem, and they had the access to so many world-class tools and expertise, it was brilliant. And I learned so much from all of them as well. And so that's one thing that I think, if I had to capture the things I learned so much about from Dow, expertise.
Okay.
And I know I've focused on the technical expertise, but I had some very, very, very good friends who were brilliant business people. One guy comes to mind, one of my very good friends, Ken Van Heel, who introduced me to the whole ventures organization, which was where I got my taste in venture new business development and helping Dow look at new technologies and things. And so he introduced me in many ways to that whole space, along with a number of other people. And understanding how they look at the other end of the problem, which is, okay, Kevin, you think this is great technology. We got to figure out whether how to use it. You can either use it, market it, and actually make money at it. And so I think the thing I missed when I retired from Dow was the ability to talk to so many really, really quality people, both quality people and experts.
Right. I think back often to, remember when Blu-ray first came out? There was Blu-ray and another technology, and then earlier than that it was VHS versus beta tapes. And the question is, which one is a better product? And I'm not sure that the better product survived, but it became which one are more people going to get behind, and then which one can you scale from a marketing perspective. And it sounds like you had a lot of those debates internally, like this could be the greatest technology ever. But what do we do with it? If we can't create a business out of it, then there's no real value. So that's pretty neat that you met someone that was in that venture space internal to the organization that could help you make that assessment.
Yes, and over my career, I ended up working with the ventures group many, many times, including on some projects where we looked at things like early in the days of LED lighting. LED lighting was ubiquitous now, but at that time it was just coming out, and there were many problems with it. And I worked with a gentleman from the Ventures organization, and we spent probably 2 or 3 years working on 3 or 4 different products and business opportunities in the LED lighting space, for example. That's another example. But I'd say I touched on so many different parts of Dow over my career that sometimes my impact was more helping to problem solve with almost more using more technical expertise. But more often than not, I think I was brought in to help manage like a very large group of projects to solve complex problems with leveraging the expertise across the company.
Right. It's amazing. So would you consider 3M one of your major competitors-ish?
I'd say 3M is more of a product-oriented company, less of a chemical company. That's not completely a fair statement. I know a number of folks that work at 3M. I would say, in some ways they're a competitor, but in some ways they're also a big customer.
Okay. I asked because it would have been great to be that guy that came up with the Post-it note. Like, that's a great product. I don't know if the technology may have started with you guys and then they create a product around it, but just figuring out that you can have this glue that sticks but not permanently stick, and you can create this little piece of paper that everyone would enjoy. Mm-hmm. Everyone uses a Post-it note these days.
Right. That's right. Yeah, I've heard stories of how it evolved. Right. Since I wasn't a 3M employee, I won't repeat them because I may not have the right story. But serendipity and observation are also very important.
Right.
As I said, sometimes the materials maybe that I brought into analytical science were, okay, this is something that we weren't expecting, but it's a very interesting looking material. We don't even know what this is yet. And so perhaps there was that kind of, observation that you find sometimes real innovations out of. And I think that one of the things that people forget is that you work with your eyes and your brain.
Right.
And so being able to watch what's happening. So I always encouraged the younger employees, I said, why are you sitting in your lab while your technologist is doing the experiments?
Right.
You're not even watching it. You know, of course they can't watch every experiment, but I always encourage them. I said, you need to at least be in the lab and see how it's being done, what's being done. You may uncover something very important, and we may never uncover it if nobody's ever watching it, because of course the technologist is busy making sure the experiment is being run correctly and things. And so, I think being aware of more than just the dogmatic target, but being able to open your eyes and that's incredibly important.
It is. I know we have a few minutes on this program. Hopefully I'll have you back next time. We can talk more of the patents and your consulting work. But one of the last ideas I had, when I worked at NASA, this was back in the early 90s, we had a company called ESRI. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're a GPS device company. And we were plotting the coordinates across the NASA facility, again, back in the early 90s. Because we thought one day there would be this mapping system where people could figure out how to get to a building, or emergency personnel could figure out how to get to a location. Back then, I think we were going to maps.com or whatever it was, MapQuest. And it's fascinating to look back and realize that technology that we were involved with then is on our telephone today. We can map and go anywhere around the globe. And how primitive it felt back then. We thought we'd never get to this idea where we could have a device on our phone even that could map out those specific coordinates. And here we are, where it's so much easier. I remember looking at the Flintstones back a long time ago, and you could have a video call. It seemed foreign just a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And now we have that capability on a device that's in our hands. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at the course of your career, what do you think that is utilized, commonplace today, that was so early back in the earlier part of your career, maybe 80s, 90s? Is there anything that stands out for you?
Absolutely. And it's information technology.
Okay.
When I started and I needed to look up papers, I had to walk across the campus to the library and pull out the either Beilstein or the American Chemical Society Index and find the paper in the journals in the stacks. And now I could sit at my desk. Still, of course, while I was still employed at Dow, I could sit over lunch and do more searching than I could do in weeks.
Oh, wow.
In a matter of minutes. And that could be, I could search patents, I could search technical reports, I could search materials data, all kinds of things. And so that access to information technology alone has revolutionized, and I'm not even going to go on into the computing capacity and ability to model chemistry and things, but just the information access is incredible.
It's amazing. You're probably like me. You remember the Dewey Decimal System, right? Where you had to go and do a lot of research in the library, and now it's so much easier. You can really manage that from your phone sitting on a beach somewhere.
That's right.
So it's incredible. So looking back at your 30-year career at Dow, what do you think most about now as your signature achievement? What legacy do you believe you left at Dow?
The employees that are still there.
Okay.
I tried to always be a champion for the folks that I worked with. I always prided myself on standing up for what was right. I tried to mentor young people as much as I could, help guide them on their careers, and to really so if people, when I left, if people said he helped me be where I am today or gave me some good guidance, then I feel like I've done a good job.
It's amazing. That mentoring is so important. So you had it from that professor at the University of Illinois, and now you've passed it on or passed it forward, it sounds like.
Absolutely, yes.
That's exciting. Kevin, it's been a pleasure having you. Hopefully we'll have you back in a while to talk about some of your other work in the small business segment, moving from a large company like Dow to the small business side. But it's been a pleasure hearing about your days as a senior scientist at one of the largest chemical companies in the world. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Thanks for joining us on Business Decoded with Ronnie Spellman.
Thank you for listening to Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. Please be sure to subscribe and share and stay tuned for more incredible Business Decoded episodes.